What is up, guys? Welcome back to another Project Boro podcast, an impromptu pod that we did not expect to be making on the 5th of June as time of recording. But if you've not heard, if you've been under a rock or on a different planet or wherever, Middlesbrough Football Club did part ways with Michael Carrick, and now the hunt for Boro's next head coach begins, looking ahead to, of course, the 25-26 season. So Chris is back with me. We've interrupted his holidays and dragged him back to talk about the Boro. I mean, first of all, I guess we've just got to open up with your initial reaction and thoughts and what you were feeling like when it dropped, because it caught pretty much everyone by surprise, didn't it?
So, what do you want to talk about? It's one of those, isn't it? It's gone from being very, very quiet, nothing happening, to full blood. It's been turned to 11, hasn't it? The whole Boro social media, message boards, phone-ins, radio stations, Twitter, it's just gone crazy, hasn't it? It's just gone mental. So yeah, any hopes of a quiet summer have gone out well and truly out the window now. We thought we were just waiting for the kit launches and the friendlies and all that. So my initial reaction was surprise. If we'd have done this 4.5 weeks ago, I wouldn't have been surprised at all, because for me, he should have gone after Coventry. It was quite clear that it was a failure this season and he should have gone. I listed the reasons why I think he should have gone. When he didn't go after that first week, I kind of thought, I mean, me and you did our reaction to the season, and we both kind of said we think he should go, but we don't think he will. And as the summer sort of progressed, and the more I thought, I'll admit I was cynical. I thought perhaps this review was just the club's way of kicking the ball into the long grass, give everyone a chance to calm down, everyone a chance to cool down, and then sort of drip feed. Yeah, Michael Carrick staying here. We're going to make these little changes here and there around the edges, and then we'll continue with the plan. So when I saw that yesterday, I was genuinely surprised. I wasn't expecting it. We did see there was some rumours and innuendo from Football Insider on Twitter, and that sort of started a chain reaction, didn't it, where everyone had a mate whose mum was friends with someone who walked someone's dog, who knew someone in the ticket office who knew Carrick was going. So you're thinking, well, this is getting a bit silly now. Like, everyone's in the know, as they say. But for me, and I know you had some views, that it was the lack of sort of put down from the journals that made me think, I'm not saying they were covering it up. I'm just always says, like, we were linked with the lad from Plymouth, and straight away it was slapped down within minutes. I mean, even today, Robbie Keane was linked, and then straight away it was slapped down, wasn't it? This sort of brewed for sort of a day and a half, and it wasn't slapped down. And probably because they hadn't received anything from the club to say this isn't true, so you can't say either way, can they? So that was the only nagging doubt where I thought, could there be some truth in this? But I was genuinely surprised. And speaking to people at the time, and one person, you must be happy. And I was like, no, not really, because it's like, if a manager's being sacked from his job at the club you support, it means you've not done well. So and I want the club to do well. I want whoever's the manager to do well. So it was with disappointment that we let him go. But for me, the club didn't really have a choice. So it's the right decision for me. The timing, I feel like, it was a little bit strange. This is just me speculating, I wouldn't be entirely surprised if it comes up later on that the clubs had the review, sort of proposed to Michael Carrick, look, we need to make some changes here. How about, we think we need to change the backroom team, and he wasn't going to have that because, Woodgate's his mate, Graham Carrick's his brother. So I can understand loyalty-wise why you wouldn't want to do that, but from the club's point of view, no change was not an option. There had to be some sort of change, whether it was change the head coach or change the backroom team. Doing nothing was not an option. So if that again, that's me tinfoil hat speculating. If someone says, Chris, how do you know that? Well, I don't. I'm just speculating. So, but I wouldn't be shocked at all if that's what's happened. And if that's the case, the club have definitely made the right decision because no change wasn't an option. So it's one of those. It's certainly injected enthusiasm from the fan base now into a debate as to who the new manager is going to be and what the rights and wrongs were. But ultimately, I think that they've made the right decision.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. I was absolutely shocked when it dropped. I couldn't believe it. I, like you, I'd sort of settled with the idea that we were probably going to go into next season with Michael Carrick. I felt that with every day that ticked by with this review, we didn't know whether it was over, whether it was still going on. It could have been done weeks ago, for all we knew. I honestly just believed that it was quietly pushed under the rug, and any changes that were being made quietly behind the scenes. And we were going into it with Michael Carrick. I mean, the article announcing the Rangers friendly last week started with Michael Carrick's squad. I thought, well, that's as close as we're going to get to a formal, confirmation. So I'd completely come to terms with it, and as you know, I wasn't particularly optimistic for next season with Carrick. I wasn't feeling any optimism or enthusiasm whatsoever. So I was just sort of plodding along, just like, well, whatever, just complete apathy. And then when it dropped, yeah, it was a strange one. There was a spring in my step afterwards because I think the fan base, the club needs a new face, needs a new voice, needs a slight change in direction. But I also felt a tinge of sadness. I can't lie about that. Michael Carrick is, I still think, a likable guy, a likable manager. I think he'll still probably go somewhere under the right circumstances and be a success, but it was becoming clearer that here it just wasn't working. And I think when you lose faith in when the fans lose faith in you, it's very, very difficult to wrestle that back. So it was a mixture of sadness that we'd come to this point, because I'd believed on many occasions that it was going to work. He had me believing after he come in that we'd finally get back to the Premier League, and it is a shame that it didn't work out. But as you say, it was the right decision, and it seems like from some of the noises that have come out since, it didn't stand a chance. It sounds like there were certain issues internally that all stemmed back to Carrick. Whether it was recruitment and the decisions that were made in January. Reports that the club were worried that if that continued, we might be seeing a similar bit of tension between him and the recruitment with the sort of characters he wanted to bring in. Maybe they'd lost faith in the characters that he wanted versus what the recruitment team wanted. We don't know how much of his input has impacted the training methods and the injuries that we've had. And then, of course, there's the tactical side of it and the results, which is the big one. It's a results-based business, and it seems like the club were particularly ticked off that we obviously didn't make the playoffs, but we fell behind the likes of Millwall, Blackburn, and were miles behind Sunderland, of course. So, yeah, a sad decision, but the right one. And as for the nature of it, I'll be intrigued to see what you think about how it's all come about. And you've touched upon it a little bit already, but I have a similar theory as you, because I would have thought if it was cut and dry, he would have been sacked weeks back. But the noises initially coming out of the club from the journals after the Coventry game was that the club wanted to keep Carrick. The ideal scenario was that they wanted to keep him. We know Gibson's a big fan, and sacking Carrick felt like the last resort. Yeah. So I feel like something over the last couple of weeks, they've been trying, for me, I think they've definitely tried to come to some sort of agreement. They've obviously reviewed the departments. They've realised that changes need doing in this place, which is great. It's great to see the club have done that. It's great to see that by the sounds of it, they've recognised and seen the same issues that us fans have been discussing for absolutely ages. But I do wonder if the proposed changes just didn't align with what Carrick wanted. And we keep saying sacked, but maybe it was more of a mutual parting of the ways. And if his brother's been relieved of his duties, I don't begrudge Carrick for wanting to stay loyal to his brother and leaving with him. I don't begrudge him for that at all. So I'd feel a little bit better about the whole thing if it is the case of, he wasn't sacked. They didn't see him finishing 10th as a sackable offence. Maybe it was what was happening around him. It didn't align with what he wanted going into next season, and that's where the parting has come from. But do you think there is something in that? Do you think maybe it's took longer because they've got a new manager in mind and they've been waiting for to get the ducks in a row there? What's your what's your theory around the situation, how it's came to be, and why it's maybe happened in the way it has?
Personally, I 100% think something like this has gone on, because what's changed in 4.5 weeks? What's changed from the full-time whistle to CBS? Nothing.
Yeah.
Nothing's changed, but still, the season's done, season's over. I mean, I put a thread out at full time and basically covered pretty much everything that we're hearing now from this review. You didn't need to have a 4.5 week review to come to the conclusions they've come up with. You could have had this review during the season. You could have started this review from the Watford game and come to the same conclusions. Anyone who's been watching Middlesbrough Football Club this season could have came to those conclusions without doing an internal review. Maybe apart from the injuries, because we don't know what's going on there on the training pitch, but. So for me, something has gone on. I suspect it's around Carrick's coaching team. Again, I don't know that. I'm just guessing. But like I said, it seemed very abrupt that suddenly it was like all the noises were he's they want him to stay, and then it was quite a short statement. Not only Michael Carrick gone, and obviously you'd expect his brother to go as well, but Jonathan Woodgate as well. That makes you hang on a minute. Jonathan Woodgate's gone, but Brad let a bit staying. Alan Fettis is staying. So then you start again. You put your tinfoil hat. You start thinking, hang on a minute. So that sort of indicates to me again that there was tensions there with the club and the coaching staff, or is that just a bit of red meat to throw to a section of the fan base, because Jonathan Woodgate was constantly criticised, constantly maligned for stuff that he wasn't in control of. People keep thinking he was the defensive coach. He never, ever held the title of defensive coach when he was at the club. Michael Carrick has control. He controls who he picks in defence. He has a say in who we buy. He sets the philosophy. He sets the tactics. He decides, I'm going to play a high line or whatever. Jonathan Woodgate has no say whatsoever. Yet Jonathan Woodgate, every time we conceded goals, he got all the blame. When Celine Dieng was chucking them in left, right, and centre, no one ever said, Alan Fettis, get him out the club. When Hayden Hattie or Dan Barlas had a bad game, no one criticised Grant Ledbetter. But for some reason, when we shipped goals, no one seemed to blame Carrick. They seemed to blame Woodgate. I just found that bit just bizarre and puzzling. And I never thought I'd be defending Jonathan Woodgate after his managerial run here, but I do feel a bit bad for him, because he's coming back to his hometown club. He probably thought, this is a great opportunity for me to rebuild my reputation on Teesside, and he caught a lot of stray bullets for stuff that he didn't have any say over. So yeah, I feel a bit bad for him in that sense, but yeah, I certainly think something's going on with regards to the coaching staff, because it did feel strange. But that said, they've waited 4.5 weeks when you could have made this decision weeks ago. And also, according to the Northern Echo, there isn't a replacement lined up. So that was my initial thought, was it's either something to do with the coaching team, or we have someone lined up and we've just been waiting for them to say yes. According to the journals, there isn't anyone lined up, which makes me again go back to something's going with the coaching team, in my opinion.
Yeah, well, I'm surprised there's no one lined up as well. I thought Boro usually put the two announcements pretty close together. The second announcement is followed quite quickly by a new appointment. I was firstly expecting a new appointment to be this week, but it sounds like it's not. There's a thorough process from what I've seen and read. It's a case of who applies for the job, who wants it. The club will then take that and put it into a shortlist of who they think suitable. They'll then look into the candidates further before making a decision. It hopefully, and we'll obviously get on to who we think we would like to see come in a little bit later on, but it seems like it's a relatively open shop. It doesn't seem like we're limiting ourselves too much. That's always the worry with Boro and our recent history of managers, that at least when it comes down to Steve Gibson and his judgment, we often always go for managers who are British, out of work, don't require compensation. So I like to think that with Kieran Scott, we'll be, opening ourselves up to more imaginative options. But we'll discuss that a little bit later. But yeah, I agree with you. I think maybe it was down to the coaching team. I mean, it was revealed by the Gazette that the club were maybe a little bit upset and begrudged losing Aaron Danks and replacing him with Graham Carrick. Now we don't know what level, what Graham Carrick did, how good of a coach he is or he isn't.
Yeah.
But it seems like that decision probably hasn't worked out either. So that's another thing that's, they've probably lost a little bit of faith in Carrick's judgment on that as well. But obviously we talk about what's come out. The club weren't happy with potentially, Carrick's decision to bring in his brother. They weren't happy with some of the signings that we made. They mentioned a lot of things that the club were particularly, weren't happy with and were judging Carrick on. But from your point of view, Middlesbrough B, yeah, that was a brutal line, wasn't it? So yeah, as well as Middlesbrough B, and I think it being a film that 10 minutes in you already know the end of. Another brutal line. What was the downfall of Michael Carrick for you, Chris? What were the main reasons that you would say, for you, it was time to make a change, and why your faith in Carrick had seemingly gone?
How long have you got? So alarm bells started ringing in my ears at the start of the season. We beat Swansea 1-0 on the opening day, and we weren't great, but we beat them. And I was one of the few positive ones. I know a lot of people were like, that was awful, it was rubbish. I was like, well, we've won our first game on the opening day for 10 years, so I'm going to take it as a positive. We move on. But I soon started getting increasingly annoyed at how many times managers would do a job on us and then say in their press conferences, we knew exactly how they were going to play. So you had it with Lebris, you had it with Heckingbottom, and you were just like, and I remember one time Michael Carrick said, he took it as a compliment. And I remember tweeting out, that's not a compliment, Michael. That's them saying, we know what you're going to do, we know how to stop you, and they are stopping you. Yeah. So you need to come up with something different. And the frustrating thing for me was that he just never seemed to learn. When you look at the points total for the 3 seasons under him, we've gone down every season. When you look at the league positions, we've gone down every season. And when you look at on the pitch, I just didn't see any improvement that he was making as a manager. If he was making like little incremental improvements each time, you could give him a bit of slack and say, look, young coach, first time the job, etc. But he just didn't seem to learn, and that was the infuriating thing about him. He just seemed so stubborn and so set in his ways that it was just so frustrating that if you look for example, Bristol City away, leading 1-0, Liam Manning then makes 3 changes early in the second half. They go 2-1 up. Carrick then responded after they scored the second, but it's too late then. I remember being at Millwall away, first half, played really well.
Millwall was my first thought and first example that come to my mind. Yeah,
played really well, but didn't really create any clear-cut chances. Half time, Alex Neil makes a change, puts an extra striker on, goes 2 up front, then makes 3 changes before the hour mark. You're thinking, hang on a minute. And then within 6 minutes, they've scored. So they've made 4 changes in the second half, went 1-0 up. And then as soon as they get to score the goal, he makes the subs. It's too late now, they're just going to sit in, and then we have to break them down. And you're just thinking, at what point, it was the same thing over and over and over again. It was reactive, it wasn't proactive. Other managers were just... And they'd come out and go, like Danny Rowe would come out, and I'm sure he said something on Boxing Day about he knew that Azaz was, he was frustrated on first half. They didn't pick up Azaz, so he brought someone at half time, put him on Azaz, took Azaz out the game, and totally shut us out the game. So he just wasn't flexible. He wasn't dynamic. It was just like you say, the same thing every week, and it got to a point where you felt like, I've seen this so many times now. It just became boring. You're thinking, I know how this ends. I know what's going to happen. And it's, there's some movies I've watched multiple times and I love them because they're very enjoyable. These weren't very enjoyable movies. This was a hard watch that you knew the ending of. And it said a lot that going to Coventry, my daughter's one of the most optimistic. She doesn't really care what the result most of the time. So a lot of the time, it's just a day out and being part of the atmosphere and seeing the team. She said we'd get beat 3-0. I was talking to people before the game. The most optimistic prediction I got from the fans that we were starting to was 1-1. I didn't speak to a single person who I thought we'd win that game. And you think it's just one game you need to win to get in the playoffs. Not a single. I don't think there was a single person there who genuinely felt we were going to win. And for me, that was just damning. We're not playing Man City away. We're playing Coventry City. As much as I like Coventry City, it shouldn't be a place where you go there thinking this is mission impossible. But there's just no faith in the team. And at the end of the season, when it was just, you couldn't get excited when other teams dropped points because you just knew what was going to happen. They were going to turn up half-hearted, play the same way as we always do, and just So for me, it was his stubbornness, it was his refusal to adapt, his refusal to learn. Because he's a smart bloke, he's played at the highest level, so he knows what he's talking about. But so I don't think it's that he couldn't change. I just don't think he just didn't want to change. I mean, this was his way. He wanted to do it like that, and he lived and died by it, and ultimately it's cost him his job.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. I feel like his persistence to play his way, with clearly a squad that wasn't good enough, was just never going to work. But there had to be a shift. There had to be a tweak somewhere to try and get us results. And I think it was, looking back in hindsight, I think it was unrealistic to ever expect Boro to play the same way and have the same level of success that we had in 22-23, because we struck gold in that season and the players we had were ridiculous. And I think since then the squad has gotten weaker. So therefore, you've got to look at different ways of finding results, different ways of playing. But he was still trying to play the same style of football with players who weren't good enough to play it. There's no surprise the results have fallen off a cliff. And he didn't change. He didn't adapt, even though the problems were clear. We could see them. I think people at the club could see them. And he wasn't willing to change that. So his stubbornness and rigidity when it comes to his tactical side of or his style was one thing. It made the football boring. I think, as I've said a few times, the fact we play good football is a myth. I've not enjoyed watching us consistently for a long time, especially not this season. And, there's a number of reasons why I think, this has been the downfall. I think, obviously, the results and the stats, they're all factual. You mentioned regression year on year, 4th, 8th, 10th. I think, to be fair, it probably looks better this season than what it should have because of how bad the league was. We finished bottom of a very, very weak playoff race. And in other seasons, we might have even been further down in mid-table. So I think maybe the league still makes it look a little bit better than what it actually was in the end. And there's other factors that just weren't improving. I mean, I remember you listing 3 or 4. I think it was really early on in the season, 3 or 4 things that you wanted to see us improve on. And that would determine where you sort of were with Carrick. And I was the same. And none of them have gotten better. You can't expect a team to get playoffs and get promotion when you're conceding upwards of 50 plus, 60 plus goals a season. It's just not going to happen. You're not going to get playoffs when your home form is mid-table. It was really, really, really average. Yeah. So there's a number of problems that have just seemingly not been fixed, and they didn't ever look like being fixed. And because of that, I couldn't see a route to success under him. I just couldn't. Unless we had a war chest of talent and a ridiculously good team, which you're never going to get at this level. If you want to seriously compete, with some of the top sides in this league who have got ridiculous wealth and resource, you've got to be cleverer, you've got to be more methodical, you've got to be adaptable, and you've got to find ways to win when you shouldn't. We were the opposite. We found ways to lose when we shouldn't. So I think all that culminated, in a position where the fans lost faith, and all the credit that he had in the bank had completely gone. And let's be honest, it had to happen now, because if not, it would have probably happened in October anyway, and that would have put us in a really tough spot. It would have been very disruptive for the start of next season. And, it is worth mentioning, this is very rare for Boro. We never sat managers in the summer, ever. No. So this is a rarity. And I'm glad, because had we gotten to October, I mean, it might not have even took that long. A couple of bad results to start the season that were even remotely as bad and as ponderous as some of the results and performances we've seen at the end of this season. Things would have turned quickly, and it would have just gone south really quickly. It wouldn't have been healthy for Boro's season. So even though there's people who like him, there's people who are fans for and against, I think it was just the right thing for the club overall. So
absolutely.
Anything else you want to discuss about Michael Carrick before we look ahead? Are there any other things that you want to mention in regards to why we find ourselves where we are and your thoughts on the decision?
I think the only thing to add is people will go on about, oh, well, injuries, he had loads of injuries, and the squad wasn't as good as before it was. Well, me and you at the start to say this wasn't a top 2 squad. No. But to finish, I think finishing below Bristol City, below Blackburn, and below Millwall, sorry, no excuse. No excuse there. For me, Sunderland did have a better squad. So, yeah, that's fine. You could argue a couple of other teams, but finishing below Millwall, especially, and that's no disrespect to Millwall, but when you look at the resources that are available to the two managers, just no excuse for me. And the other thing I found frustrating was the way he communicated through the press.
Yeah,
I think he often saw it. As him versus Mark Drury. There's times I was driving home listening to the car, and I'm thinking Mark Drew's going to put a gum shield in here, the way this is going. But that's not what it is. It's not you versus Mark Drury. It is Mark Drury is there as a conduit to ask you questions that the fans want answers to. I remember when he asked him about, do you think your players can handle the pressure? And it was as if someone run over his dog. He was absolutely furious at even suggestion of it. But that's what all the fans were asking. All the fans wanted to know that, because we saw it time and time again. Weak mentality. Teams score, fall like a set of deck chairs every single time. Minor setback, heads go down, don't come back up. Every time that there was teams drop points, we had a chance to make it count, failed. So it was a perfectly legitimate question, but and it was the one I think after the West Brom game, the one that really got me when he talked about, I think Drury asked him, I just took any of the pressure off you, and he just sort of scoffed him and pressure. He's like, I don't know what everyone's been so negative about. You think we were bottom of the league. Why's everyone being so negative? It's like, Michael, that might have something to do with that. We've prior to the game we dropped out of the playoffs, won one of the last 6. Went out the cup in the first round to Blackburn at home. He's talking so bullish. And well, what's everyone been so negative about? We then went and lost our next 5 games. And you're thinking, if you're going to talk like that, you have to be able to back it up. And he just wasn't able to. And I just think that, I just hope he learns going forward that the media, quite often the media would like a little sound bite or something, get the ears, get the eyeballs, get the clicks and all that sort of stuff. But the media are there to ask questions because fans don't have the chance to ask questions, so they're asking them, and quite often it's what they're thinking. And you'd be surprised as how many people sort of like when you're looking through the messages that get sent to BBC Tees on Twitter and all that. It's people either saying that they're sort of in the club's pocket or they're out to get the manager. It's like 2 extremes, and I think they're just trying to do the job. So I hope he learns in future that he needs to be a bit more open, a bit more honest. I think he would have got a bit more credit in the bank with fans if he actually called some of those players out, not individually. That's not his style. But there's so many times when you can see the effort, the application, the attitude just wasn't there. Sheffield Wednesday, no one will ever convince me that those players were given 100% second half in that game. And rather than go, oh no, how dare anyone question, the players' commitment or like say, no, everything's fine. Every now and then I'd like to have heard him say, you know what, the level of commitment, level of attitude, the level of desire today, that wasn't to the levels that I expect from my team. I apologise to the fans. I want to make sure that we put that right next week, and we give them a performance. It was always defend the players, and eventually the fans just get annoyed because it's like you're sort of telling me something that I'm seeing something totally different. And I just think, he could have got a lot more fans on side by sort of understanding their concerns rather than why is everyone being so negative. Like, okay, I understand it's been a difficult season so far, but we're confident going forward that we're going to put things right. I found him very dismissive in his interviews, and I think he needs to learn from that.
Yeah, it's a good point. Yeah, the character.
Yeah.
I think as well as the fans losing faith, I think they'd also lost connection with the team. They didn't resonate with the team. They didn't, the connection between the club and the fans and the players and the team and the manager had just completely gone. I didn't feel like I could resonate with this Boro side. And I think it is true to suggest that the team was a reflection of the manager in the end. A bit too calm, a bit too ponderous, a bit too lethargic, at times where they're in a big game and, they need to recognise the stakes. They need to rock up their arse. They just wasn't there. And I think maybe just a club like ours, we like managers with a little bit more character, a little bit more enthusiasm, dare I say, a bit more passion. I dropped the P word in there. I know that word gets thrown around, but yeah, just a bit more honesty as well. I'm not wanting a manager who's going to come out and slate his players every week, or be like Nathan Jones who does somersaults up and down the touchline.
Yeah.
But I think if the manager just had that little bit more honesty and personality, and I think a bit more steeliness, the team would have had that, and the team would have probably been a little bit stronger mentally, and I think the crowd would have recognised that, responded to that, because I think the Boro fans really respond to a team that fights hard, gives their all, shows character, and that I think comes from the manager. And I just think the whole culture was just maybe a bit laid back, a bit lackadaisical, and we were a pretty team. We were a pretty team, a nice tippy-tappy flair team, and when we were 3-0 up against Oxford at home, we were the best team going and we looked $1 million. But as soon as you drag us into a scrap away at Fratton Park or the Den, and you need the team to pull out a result, no chance. I mean, how is that team going to perform in a playoff final when the stakes are at its highest, and you need to do what Sunderland did: come from behind in the second half, drag yourself out, get a result from nowhere. I just feel like from the personnel that the manager likes, the players he picks, the characters he wants, the sort of players he likes in his team, as well as his personality, I think that the whole thing there wasn't enough there for me, enough character to have a team that could drag itself through a fight and a scrap and get the results needed. So I think that's another really good issue on the character of the manager.
Yeah, you don't want to feel like the manager's gaslighting you, do you? You don't want to feel like he's seen a totally different game to you. I mean, like, if you remember Steve McLaren, our most successful manager in our history, but
he is. Yeah,
fans didn't like it when he came out, and we clearly weren't very good. So we were magnificent.
That was
and the fans were like, "What are you talking about?" And it just creates a divide between
fans. Aren't stupid. They're not stupid.
Thinking,
no.
What's he's seen a different game to me. I mean, and then that's follow-up questions. Was that what he's seen? Is he trying to gaslight us? Is he deluded? And then it takes you down a path you don't want to go down, does it?
No, exactly. So that's we've dropped a few hints there as to what we would like from a Boro team and a manager going forward. So I think it's only fair we jump into the subject of what's next, because we've discussed Carrick a lot throughout the season. We've discussed him again here. I think everyone knows our thoughts on what's happened, but now we've got to look ahead. And I'll be honest, I have absolutely no idea where we are going to go. There were a number of candidates that I think were the obvious names because we know they're liked within the club, the Steve Coopers, the Rob Edwards. But honestly, now I know that we don't have anything imminent and that we are seemingly going through the very beginning of a full-on recruitment process for this new manager. It could be anyone. It could be anyone. It could be anyone or everyone. So, I mean, where do we go from here? Is there anyone you would like? Is there a particular manager you like in terms of character, style? Or is there a name specifically? Because right now, I haven't a clue. No idea who we're going to get in.
So, yeah, I thought, because, I mean, you touched on it earlier, it's a bit like when you play Football Manager and you're searching for someone, you put the filters on, isn't it? If Steve Gibson's putting the filters on for a manager, he always goes British, unemployed. There you go. And that's how you find his managers. So I thought that the obvious choice, who I was pretty, I wasn't, but like maybe sort of 70% 70% sort of sure that he'd go for was Steve Cooper. However, as we've seen, according to Jim White on TalkSport, apparently it would be a polite no because he's got other projects on at the moment. So that's kind of scuppered it now. Now I really don't know where we're going here. I kind of feel like if you see Rod Stewart doing the Scottish FA Cup draw, it's kind of just like straight in. You might as well put all the managers' names on the balls and just get Rod Stewart and just stick it in and pull a name out, because I honestly don't know where we're going now. I've certainly wasn't. I can't shake the nagging feeling that it might be Rob Edwards, because I think we were close to appointing him when we appointed Carrick. He has a relationship with Kim Scott. He has experience, and he has experience in this league. He's got Luton promoted. However, he would not excite me one bit. I would have concerns that, yes, he did a good job at Luton, but when he got Luton promoted, that's probably his only outstanding season he's had in management. I can't remember how he did at Forest Green. I must be honest. So maybe he did a great run with them, but he must have done all right to get the Watford job. But obviously he was sacked with Watford and then 10th, probably harshly. But obviously he didn't do anything with Luton in the Premier League. You wouldn't expect him to, really, would you? But then they came back down, and many, including myself, thought they would be up there challenging for promotion. And they found themselves at the opposite end of the league, and he had to sack him before he had the chance to take him down. So he wouldn't really excite me, I'll be honest. The man I would like is Danny Rowe.
Here.
However, do I think we'll appoint Danny Rowe? No. Because he's not British and he's not unemployed.
He wouldn't appear on the filters, would he?
He wouldn't. No, absolutely not. So I don't think we will pay the compensation. There's also the talk as to what the figure is. Is it £4-5 million? So you have to think, okay, if Boro are going to do around that figure, if Boro are going to do that, is that going to come out the transfer kitty to do that? Would it be able to stagger it over so much, or Sheffield Wednesday going to want it up front? He'll probably have better offers as well. Let's be honest. He's a highly regarded coach, so I think there's a lot of obstacles in our way towards getting Danny Rowe. But he'd be the only one that I've seen the list that would excite me. That would make me think, oh wow, I'm really looking forward to next season if we could get Danny Rowe. That's it. Edwards. I wouldn't be devastated if we appointed Edwards, but it just wouldn't excite me. The only one I'd be really good if we appointed was Steven Gerrard. He's just a name. He's just a name. It'd be a dreadful appointment, but obviously there's no real serious links of him. Robbie Keane, thankfully that was slapped down quickly. No interest from me personally. I'm struggling to think of anyone else, so I'm hoping personally it's a left field appointment. It's like an Aitor Karanka style. Oh God, that came out of nowhere. No one knows who he is. If I'm trying to think of some English versions of what the left field appointment would be, I've seen some people mention Dave Challoner. That'd be an interesting appointment. That would certainly pluck my interest. I wouldn't be against it. I wouldn't be massively far. I'd just feel, that's a really interesting appointment. Lee Carsley, that'd be another one. That would be. I know he's not unemployed, but that would be another one where you think that's a bit left field. That's interesting. I think it's going to be really difficult to appoint someone who the majority of the fan base are going to be happy with. So that's why I think they need to try and go a bit left field, like Sheffield did when they appointed Danny Moore. I know he'll be known to all the football hipsters, but most fans wouldn't have had a clue who he was, or like Reggie the Briss, no one would know who he was. The guy from QPR whose name I can't pronounce. Again, that's the one. Yeah, someone like him. Yeah, total left field. No one knows who he was, but has a great coaching pedigree and background. I think that's kind of where I think we might need to go here, because I spoke with Boro fans who are just like, we were repulsed at the idea of Steve Cooper, who hate the idea of Edwards, who don't rate Danny Roll, and other people who'll rip the season tickets up if it's Gary O'Neill who's appointed. So it's going to be very difficult to please the majority, I think, at the minute.
Yeah, that's the issue, isn't it? I think unless they go real left field and they pick someone that we have no preconception of at all, then there's going to be a split. And the problem I have at the minute is I look at Boro and I think, you know what? We are a playoff challenger at best right now.
Mm-hmm.
And consistently, probably a mid-table championship club. That's fair to say. So why do we feel that we are in a position and we are entitled enough to turn our noses up at a Steve Cooper? Why do we feel like we can turn our noses up at all these managers that have been linked that instantly Boro fans go, ugh, I wouldn't want him. Yeah. We are a mid-table championship club and we are looking at managers here who have been in the Premier League, managers who've had promotions. So I think we need to temper our expectations and just maybe take a step back a little bit. Now, I would love a left field appointment. Obviously, an Aitor Karanka is the most obvious sort of one that people always go back to because he was the last manager to be successful here and no one had heard of him. He wasn't English and he got us promoted. Not saying that would work again, but, why not? I'm kind of getting a bit tired of Boro dipping into the merry-go-round of British managers because although they are different in a way, Monk, Wilder, Pulis, Warnock, they're all much of a muchness in a sense. So I would like to be surprised by whoever we get in, but equally, I don't know if Gibson would do that. I think if he allows Kieran Scott to do his job, and that is advise Gibson on who he thinks we should get in, then the pool of managers should be huge. Kieran Scott, I'd imagine, will have scouted all of Europe. He would have looked everywhere and studied a ton of different managers as he does players. And there might have been people who he's had an eye on for a very long time. I remember last summer when he did a round of interviews for various different podcasts, he was on the breakdown and he said to us, he has to look ahead, even if it's in regards to the manager. He's got to, because equally Michael Carrick could get snapped up if we're really successful, doing really well. Equally, it could be, as it has been now, if we're doing really badly. So I'd like to think there's already a long list of managers who we like. And if they approach us and apply, we will quite quickly be able to whittle that down to a short list. So I'd like us to do something different. But of the four that have been mentioned, I don't have a strong opinion either way on Steve Cooper or Rob Edwards. I wouldn't be massively excited or upset with either. Cooper would probably be too much of a shift in style, but he could possibly keep us up if we did get into the Premier League. I'd have a lot more faith in him getting us up and keeping us up than a lot of other managers. Rob Edwards, he did a good job at Forest Green. He got them promoted. He was harshly sacked at Watford. And then he did get Luton promoted. And he got them through the same playoff four, I may add, that Michael Carrick did not get us through. So he navigated Luton through that and got them promoted. And I think they did finish the stronger of the three newly promoted sides that season, albeit they did fall quite far short in the end. I think they were the most competitive of the three.
Yeah.
So they did okay. And I think when you look at Luton, who have come down, yeah, it's been a disaster. But I think there's more to their downfall than just Rob Edwards. There's talk of the money they're having to fork out for a new stadium, how much that's handcuffed them financially. Listen, it's still a terrible job that, what's happening. It's an undoubted blemish on his CV. But I don't think Rob Edwards is as bad of a shout as maybe people think. Plus, he has got obvious multiple links with numerous people at Boro, so I can absolutely see that being a likely outcome. And then you've got Danny Roll, who would be my pick. I'd absolutely throw money at him. I think if you're willing to invest a few million in a player, why not in a manager? I'd absolutely throw everything. I'd go and get Danny Roll. I think he's got the right character that we alluded to earlier. I also think he's adaptable. He's tactically very clever. And I think given a better squad, I'd be very confident he could take us forward. The other manager is Brian Prisk, who's been heavily linked. Now, he's come from nowhere. He has just left Feyenoord. and he's done quite well throughout Europe. He's won numerous league titles in a couple of Europe's top leagues. And I don't want to get too hooked on win percentages because I think that can be deceiving.
Yeah.
But he's done incredibly well at Feyenoord. He did unbelievably well at Sparta Prague. He won 63 of his 96 games, only lost 13. He did equally as well at Midtjylland in Denmark. He could be that left field foreign option who I wouldn't mind bringing in. So, yeah, there's a few names. It wouldn't surprise me if it was none of them. But I guess to finish, what do you want from a manager? What do you want? If you could have a checklist, what would you want? And I guess the final question on top of that is, what would you like? But what do you think we'll get?
I personally would want, the reason I want Danny Rose was I want someone who's adaptable. I want someone who it isn't just, there's too many coaches these days, like Carrick, like Postecoglou, like Amorim, who are basically, this is the way we're going to play, take it or leave it. And I know people, the people who know a lot more about tactics than me will say, but what you don't see in the games is this little tweak here, this little tweak there. For me, it's all just tinkering around the edges. It's, we saw Carrick could be adaptable when he was forced to. It's when he wasn't forced. We saw Leicester away. We saw Millwall, if it wasn't QPR away, the Chelsea home game. When he was forced to, he could do it, but he didn't want to do it. So I want a manager who, when he sets his looks at what he's got and adapts to that. I think Steve Cooper did do that quite often at Forest. And if you wanted someone who could oversee the big rebuild that's going to happen in the summer, then who better than the guy who oversaw about 30 players coming in and Nottingham Forest? So he can do. So we need someone who is adaptable, someone who is better at handling the media. Someone who can convey his thoughts and feelings about, and not be sort of too cagey about it. It doesn't really bother me, but I think fans like to see a manager who shows a bit of passion, dare I say. Doesn't really bother me whether the manager's chucking water bottles around or is ranting and raving, but some people like to see that. So I thought, at times, Carrick was a bit of an emotionless robot at times. It would be nice every now and then to see, a manager sort of giving it there. The main one for me is tactical adaptability and someone who can smell danger. Someone who thinks, okay, this isn't going well, and we'll make a change. There's just so many times, so many games I look back on and think, you go in at half time, that was terrible, and people think, I do this at half time, I do that at half time. You think, well, he's not going to do that. He's not going to make it just at half time. He's going to wait the 70th minute. So that's the main one I want, someone who's adaptable. But yeah, who will we get? Yeah,
what's your gut saying?
My gut's saying Rob Edwards, but that's not my choice. That's not me wishing to happen. That's who I think it probably will be, but that's what my gut's telling me it's going to be. But I'm fairly open-minded as to who it's going to be. Like you said, I'd love a left field appointment who people have no preconceptions of. People have, I don't like the job he did there, or I don't like the way he played there, or we played him once and he said mean things about us. I don't want any of that nonsense. I'd like someone who is coming in, clean slate, fresh start, fresh pair of eyes on the club, and can hopefully address some of the issues that we've been suffering from.
Yeah, I agree with a lot of that. I would like a manager that is just more tactically adept. Is not afraid to change things in games, is a bit more proactive and can mix things up when needed. I'm not wanting a manager who changes his formation every game, but has that plan B if needed. And just a manager that puts winning games at the priority. And I'm not saying that Carrick didn't, but I often felt like he was so stuck to his style of play. Not that the results were secondary, but it kind of felt like he was just that little bit too stubborn. Whereas I'd like a manager who just ensures
win at
that
all costs.
We find a way to win. Yeah, I'm not bothered whether it's a pretty name, and I'm not bothered whether the football's pretty. I'm not wanting Pulis ball. I'm not wanting something that's absolutely dire, but I'm not massively craving for an unbelievably exciting, enticing style of play. I want to see a team that can defend hard for starters, build from the back, and scrap. And if they can play good stuff, then great, brilliant. That's a bonus. Fundamentally, a team that can just find a way to win when they perhaps shouldn't, and a manager that can maximise what he's got, can get more out of the team, more than the sum of its parts, like a lot of managers can do in the Championship. Because for me, as I said earlier, I don't think Boro have the budget or will be able to pull in the level of players that can compete at the very highest level of the Championship. But if you've got a manager that can get the absolute most out of them, and maybe a little bit more, then you might get, like what Lebris did at Sunderland. So that's what I would like. Who do I think will get? Yeah, Rob Edwards is in the back of my mind as well, just because he ticks all the boxes.
Yeah, he ticks so many boxes, doesn't he?
He's on the filter, so all the filters on Football Manager pop up. But also, if there was a relationship bar, it would be pretty high to the top, because he's worked with Kieran Scott, he's worked with Chris Jones, and I feel like Gibson likes backing young English managers. Mostly, he likes to give them their first opportunity. This wouldn't be quite that, but I can see Rob Edwards being the sort of character he would like. But I would like to hope there is a complete left field option. And I did see a few people suggest that there is a compensation fee tied to Edwards as well in relation to Luton. So I don't know if that would possibly rule him out. And I've also saw that if Sheffield Wednesday go into administration, which is maybe rumoured to be happening, that could completely void Danny Rowe's compensation. So don't know. But I think it's going to take a while. I don't think we're going to be back here tomorrow discussing a new manager. No. I think maybe, if not next week, it probably will be the week after. So
it's certainly not like, if you remember when we went from Woodgate to Warnock, it was like snap your fingers and it was done. Switch over.
Wilder, wasn't it?
Wilder. Yeah. From Warnock to Wilder, the same happened there. I think he was talking on BBC T's post-match after the West Brom game, and Wilder was announced, and I think it was news to him. So it's definitely not going to be that, isn't it? It's going to be, I think we're in for a week or two.
Indeed we are. So we will sit tight. We will keep our eyes glued to the socials. We will keep refreshing our phones continuously. And no doubt, once a new manager is appointed, we'll be back to discuss who that is here. And we'll have another podcast for you coming. Didn't expect us to be doing one podcast in June, never mind two. But here we are.
No, definitely not.
And then we were discussing doing a podcast at the end of June, weren't we? Looking ahead to the transfer window. So we've not had a break. We've not really had a break, have we? We've had 4 weeks, and it feels like we're already firing up for the next season already.
When you think about it, new managers are going to be appointed. You're going to have the fixtures coming out in a couple of weeks. New kits announced. New signings start coming in. Pre-season starts. It's just going to be non-stop for Boro, isn't it? What looked like it was going to be a quiet 3 weeks. So, Oh, hey, it's all busy. It's all good. It's all good.
It is. So if you've enjoyed this podcast and you're new and you look forward to hearing all that good stuff, subscribe if you haven't already. If not, and you're already subscribed, smash a like on the video. You can also listen to these on your podcast providers. There are links in the description. And most importantly, leave us a comment below with your thoughts on the sacking, what you think Carrick's downfall was, and who you think we will bring in next. But as always, Chris, thank you very much for jumping on and joining me. And I dare say we'll be back doing this in a few weeks' time to discuss whoever the new manager may be.
Please be a good one. Please be a good one.
Please be a good one. Hopefully we're not sat in like a bomb shelter because, war's just kicked off in Middlesbrough because the whole town has just started a civil war because they can't agree on the new manager and, war hasn't kicked off. But we'll see. We'll see. Thanks for watching, everybody. And we'll see you soon.